Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
I don't think that highway should have been opened for public transit at that point in time because it was just far too dangerous.
More questions around that fatal Christmas Eve bus crash in BC and why more wasn't done to prevent it. And local charities feeling the pinch with the rising cost of living, how they're handling the decline in donations.
You got 200 lemons for $2 worth of energy.
Plus, meet the BC fruit growers testing the limits with subtropical produce and what they're hoping to achieve.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Anita Bathe. In the aftermath of the fatal Christmas Eve bus crash on Highway 97C, there are questions about why the road wasn't closed. Those who live and travel in the area say it's a stretch of road well known for wildly changing weather patterns. What is safe one moment can be treacherous the next. Valpuri reports.
It was a horrifying scene. A bus full of Christmas travelers overturned along an icy stretch of one of BC's most notorious highways. Those who know the road well have no idea why it wasn't flagged for closure.
I think the contractor should have been a little bit more proactive on the highway that night and shut that highway down. I don't think that highway should have been opened for public transit at that point in time because it was just far too dangerous.
4 people died. Dozens of others were injured when the bus slipped off Highway 97C just east of Merritt.
In the city here in Merritt, we were completely covered in ice from one end to the other. There was nothing that wasn't covered in ice. Vehicles, fences, roads. Getting out of our driveways was almost impossible. I could not imagine being on the highway at that point in time.
Maintenance crews were reportedly out all day Saturday, plowing, sanding and salting the highway. But there's no explaining why the road wasn't simply shut down to traffic.
They regularly report to the ministry about the conditions they're observing. The 97C is also informed by a remote weather station that also is predicting and monitoring ongoing precipitation, which was quite low throughout the day and including at the time of this tragic accident.
The forecast is calling for another drop in interior temperatures this week, particularly in the alpine areas of the Highway 97 connector.
Driving is going to be extremely treacherous, especially when you have a thaw session like we've had where a lot of stuff melts and you get run off onto the road. That's going to freeze, turn to ice, and then you have the snow falling on top of it, so you're going to have those incompatible layers, which initially will make it extremely slippery.
Closing the highway has happened in the past, but it's rare.
I think sometimes there's a hesitancy because it's a commerce highway. It moves goods. There's commerce involved with it. It's all about keeping the commerce flowing, I think, and sometimes that human safety gets lost in that.
6 people hurt in the weekend crash are still in hospital. Valpuri, CBC News, Vancouver.
The Canadian Border Services Agency says a detainee in custody at an immigration holding centre in Surrey has died. It happened Christmas Day, the day the detainee was found unresponsive, and all efforts to revive him were unsuccessful. The family of the man has been contacted, but his identity is not being released. Surrey RCMP and BC Coroner Service are both investigating the circumstances surrounding the death. Well, a former BC massage therapist has been handed a 25-year ban from working because of a sexual misconduct allegation. Leonard Kraykick has practiced in Penticton, White Rock and Surrey and is banned for unwanted sexual touching of 6 patients. The College of Massage Therapists of BC describes this as one of the most serious cases of misconduct they've ever handled. The 51-year-old must also pay $100,000 in fines and costs. Throughout the disciplinary panel process, patients shared disturbing stories, and the panel felt it needed to send a strong message to the profession that sexual touching of patients will not be tolerated. With another high tide on the way, people and municipalities along BC's south coast are getting ready while still surveying the damage from the recent king tides. As John Hernandez reports, they caused localized flooding and many beaches are covered with debris.
This is the worst we've seen it.
John Crosby watched as the king tides rolled in on Tuesday. There was little he could do.
It actually tripped our electrical, so we had no power for a while. And everybody just gets ready. You just there's nothing you can do.
The water flooded parking lots, storage garages, and raised the boathouses uncomfortably high.
If it came any higher, they could have had some problems that way.
Crosby says thankfully significant damage to the community was avoided. A similar story in the Delta community, Beach Grove, which was battered by winds and high tides on Tuesday, but saw limited property damage, aside from the beach, which is now littered with logs and debris. In Vancouver, the seawall will stay closed until later in the week, with park board officials saying the repairs made after the last king tide and storm surge held up.
So far, it looks okay. We'll obviously be doing in-depth inspections over the next coming days as the water levels reduce.
Environment Canada says another exceptionally high tide, driven by the Earth's proximity to the moon, will come tomorrow. And with rain also expected, residents are urged to watch for flooding.
The threat from the peak is down. I think yesterday was the peak. We're going to see elevated tides at any rate, probably 30 to 40 centimeters over the next day or two.
The warning, also a reminder that in the future, these high tide events are expected to get worse.
So with the background sea level rise, we would expect higher tides, higher king tides.
A trend these vulnerable coastal communities will seemingly have to adapt to.
We'll need to make some strides on how to improve the seawall and the shorelines.
Cities and the government has to do something with the dredging out the river, and then also making the dike higher.
Destruction is limited this time around, but these annual tides don't always play nice. John Hernandez, CBC News, Vancouver.
A special avalanche warning has been issued for recreational backcountry users in the BC interior. The warning is in effect from now until the end of Monday. That's January 2nd.
Up until last week, it's been unusually dry and cold, and that's created a thin, weak snowpack across this large region. Until last week, we had this big, wet snowfall on top of it, and that's created heavy loading and a weak snowpack structure. And this really pattern of heavy, dense snow above weak snow underneath is what's causing the concern in these areas.
The warning covers most of the Columbia Mountains, Glacier and Mount Revelstoke National Parks, and the Northern Rockies. All right, Johanna Wagstaff is away tonight. Kuljeet Kaila is here. And Kuljeet, it feels like we've just gotten through some serious rain, and now we're expecting more, aren't we?
Yes, we are. And today was the day that we got that break. It was pretty dry outside. It was actually quite lovely this afternoon. But the rain does come back, and it's going to start early Thursday morning. So the Thursday morning commute will be impacted, and it will be steady all through Thursday, Friday into Saturday early morning. And we're going to get quite a bit of it. We're still seeing a mix of snow and rain at higher elevations. And that avalanche warning that they were just talking about, that too is affecting weather across the province. Into Saturday morning, we'll see that rain kind of continue, and then it tapers off for the weekend with a good chance of it holding off. And here are the totals for the next 2 days in terms of rain: 45 millimeters for Vancouver, a little bit more for Coquitlam, and a little bit less out in the Fraser Valley. But here it comes. Get those umbrellas out. Current temperatures outside holding steady at 4 degrees at the airport, 2 in Nanaimo, 5 on the North Shore. Above seasonal right now still. And what we're going to see tomorrow morning is rain when the sun rises just after 8 o'clock. And that rain again steady all throughout tomorrow at 20 millimeters across the province. This is what we're going to see. Pretty windy conditions for Port Hardy, up to 100-kilometer-an-hour winds tomorrow, 5 degrees and raining, and about 4 centimeters of snow on the way for Kelowna. A 40% chance of snow for Williams Lake as well tomorrow in BC. Anita, I'll have details coming up on the 7-day forecast next.
Okay, we'll talk to you soon. Thanks, Kuljeet.
You're welcome.
Well, the SPCA is asking British Columbians to take caution while enjoying the great outdoors. The organization says some activities can disturb wildlife and force animals into new places during an already harsh season.
They could move into an area that's not as optimal for them. It might not have the resources they need. There might be more predators. There could be greater competition with other animals.
Wallace says repeated disturbances could be detrimental to a wild animal if they can't find the resources they need. The SPCA is recommending outdoor enthusiasts remain on trails, obey signs and area closures, never chase wildlife, and keep dogs on leash. More tips can be found on the SPCA's website. From oranges and lemons to avocados, they're fruits you really don't think of as ones that grow in BC's southwest. But tonight, we are looking at some of the province's growers who are testing the limits with subtropical produce. As Anita Bathe reports, their hope is to spark more conversations about food security and climate resilience.
It's not your typical backyard BC greenhouse.
These trees are they're heroes.
Lemons, oranges, avocados, pears, and even these, Abuda's hand citron. More than 34 varieties of subtropical fruits.
I'm just super curious about every aspect of making this work. I'm like spending time with a microscope. I'm monitoring the progression of the biology in the soil, the fungal interrelationships. I'm like, that's my passion.
Growing takes patience and creativity, and not to mention Southwest BC's climate much milder than the rest of Canada.
I am growing anything that I can grow that's somewhat subtropical, that can tolerate 1 degree centigrade.
The greenhouse relies solely on these pools of rainwater. In the winter, a wood gasifier furnace heats the water. These fans circulate the heat from the pools, while these curtains prevent heat loss. The entire system prevents the plants from freezing.
I chose to grow this stuff with as little energy inputs as possible.
Squire believes experimenting can help improve food security by understanding how to make fruit more resilient to extreme temperatures.
When we had that heat dome here, and I had a 40% shade over this greenhouse. It's getting a little extreme for them at that level, but I came through just fine in that heat dome.
And she's not the only one doing this work.
The fruit here, it's just about ready to pick.
Bob Duncan's greenhouse near Sydney has more than 400 varieties of tree fruits.
Most of these Mediterranean things nobody dreamed of before, so we are successfully growing citrus of all kinds.
When cold weather hits, Duncan uses incandescent Christmas lights for heat and a cover to keep the fruit alive.
One string of Christmas lights that in our climate here would be on maybe 10 nights in the entire winter. So you got 200 lemons for $2 worth of energy. This is a pomegranate called Utah Sweet.
His long-term goal is to get more people on the South Coast experimenting.
If something happens in the areas where food is principally produced in California and Florida, we have a backup plan and can produce most of this fruit ourselves locally and are not dependent so much on offshore food production.
Experts say finding new ways to produce enough food locally year-round is vital.
We are very reliant on imports, and that can be a little scary.
She says while projects like these cultivate valuable lessons, it can still be a very difficult pursuit.
At some level, this is a niche activity that takes a lot of effort and is probably not financially viable at scale yet.
And as these fruits ripen for Squire and Duncan, it's a labor of love, inspiring others to think outside the box while enjoying a bite too. Anita Bathe, CBC News, Vancouver.
Well, BC's agency that resolves tenant-landlord disputes is getting more funding in hopes of reducing the backlog of claims. The residential tenancy branch will get $15 million from the province over the next 3 years and the ability to hire 50 new employees. The agency deals with issues like accusations of illegal evictions and landlord issues with tenants refusing to leave.
With the hiring of these additional staff, wait times will begin to decrease and disputes will be resolved sooner. This will alleviate financial impacts to landlords and, of course, address precarious housing situations for tenants.
Since the pandemic, the residential tenancy branch has been overloaded with applications, struggling with long wait times. The funding and new hires will aim to streamline the process. To the rising cost of living now, which is having an impact on how much people are able to give back. In 2022, 48% of Canadians plan to donate to a charity or nonprofit. That's way lower than the 56% reported in 2021. The research poll conducted by Imagine Canada shows of those planning to donate, 38% said they'd give less than they have before, and almost 9 out of 10 Canadians blame the current economic climate as the reason more Canadians are relying on charity services. With all of that, joining me live now is Jeff Golby, CEO of the charity Acts for Water. Jeff, your organization is based here, but your work is primarily helping communities in Uganda access clean and safe drinking water. Tell me about the decline your organization has seen in donations this year.
Thanks so much for having me. Yeah, over the past giving season, we've experienced about a 50% decline in charitable giving. And of course, for us, that means much less clean, safe water for kids like Crispus, whom I just met recently, receiving clean, safe water for life. So it's a big impact for us.
What are you hearing from other charities and nonprofits around you in terms of the overall pot and in people giving to charities?
Yeah, and quite unfortunately, it's a very similar story amongst all of my peers. Giving is either flatlined, which of course with inflation means that it's a negative, or it's significantly depressed this past year. So it is quite a challenging situation for nonprofits like ours.
Yeah, and what do you know about why there's a decline in donations despite a growing number of donors?
Yeah, so what's so interesting is we've been faced with a little bit of a contradiction. There has been more people giving to organizations like ours, though in much smaller amounts. But generally, the reasons for the decrease in giving has been the cost of living, the increased cost of living. And then the second reason has just been a lower return on investments. So for donors who generally give off of the returns on their investments, particularly those investments held in the stock market, those just aren't quite there this year. And so people are less able to give.
How are charities in general going to get by with less money coming in? Because we know the need is so much greater. So, what's happening? What's changing there? And could we even see some shut down, in your opinion?
So there's two answers to that. On one hand, I have incredible hope. We, in 2020, we thought the world was going to end, yet we saw Canadians rise up with incredible generosity and give like we didn't expect it. We saw that same hope kind of come through in 2021. And so I hold that hope. And I think, there's still time left in this year, and there are still incredible charities doing really important work like ours, providing clean, safe water, but like so many others. And I would really hope that Canadians could give before the year is out so that good work can continue. But on the other hand, charities aren't miracle workers. And so that probably means that there will be less good done in the world in the year ahead through charities, because we can only stretch our dollars so far. But if Canadians are feeling generous, they can give at acts.ca or at many other of the good charities that are out there working every day to make this world a better place.
Jeff Golby with Acts of Water. Thank you.
Thanks so much for having me.
And stick with us. Right after the break, we've got more on the cost of living and what you can expect in 2023. Thanks for watching our commercial-free live stream. You probably remember the military being on PEI after Hurricane Fiona to help with the cleanup. We spoke to some of those members earlier this fall, and they told us their memories of that time and the challenges they faced.
That's what we do. We come in, we help as long as we need to help, and then we're on to the next task.
If there's islanders in need of help, or any other Canadians even off island, I definitely jump at the opportunity to help other people, if I can.
Islanders helping islanders. I love helping people, so that was my main goal. It doesn't matter how much uncomfortable we are, there's other people that are more in need, so we just go out and do that right away.
I mean, that's part of why we joined the reserves, because we want to give back to the community, and for the reserves doing domestic operations like this is our bread and butter. This is what we train to do. So we just felt it was our responsibility.
Well, we have a really good support system here on the island. I find people helping people out, we had really good communities here, and that everyone kind of came in together in the community to help my family and everybody else out while I was helping it.
There's a lot of trees on PEI, and I definitely got quite a bit better with a chainsaw by the end of it. I was deployed on Operation Lentis with the Prince of Island Regiment, and for the most part, we did hurricane cleanup. We We worked chainsaws, we moved debris, we did wellness checks. That's basically what we did. People were extremely happy to see us out and about, and we got lots of thank yous. There was people giving us free coffee, and it was great.
Gratitude, thanks. That was a lot of honking. There's a lot of people waving at us, saying thank you. Just overall, like, gratitude was the #1 thing.
Well, we got tons and tons of thank yous, like countless amounts. It was good to see that the community was actually, they know what we're out here doing our work. So I'm doing my best, trying to help out the Islanders, get things and power restored as fast as possible, doing my part and just serve our country.
Continuing on now with the cost of living and affordability. If you feel like your wallet has taken a hit this year, you're not alone. Many Canadians have been left drained by higher interest rates, inflation, skyrocketing rent, and grocery costs. So what happened and what does 2023 hold? John Hernandez explains.
If there's one thing that 2022 taught us, it's that life isn't cheap.
Everything went up, even the medication.
Holy crap, it takes me, $30 just to eat lunch.
I just keep looking and seeing my retirement getting farther and farther and farther away.
Affordability challenges that steadily mounted through the year, but can be traced back to well before it began. Canada's inflation rate dipped dramatically in the early stages of the pandemic when there were lockdowns and less economic activity. But it rebounded to above 3% in 2021 as the country slowly reopened. By January 2022, it was above 5%.
I remember exactly 1 year ago thinking, okay, 2.5% inflation, 3%, that's just catching up from the no inflation in 2020, early pandemic, everything was shut down, prices didn't rise. So a little bit extra seemed like it's just catching up, and then it just kept climbing and climbing.
This economist calls it the pandemic whiplash effect. He says as people became comfortable spending money again, supply chains were backed up.
It just was really hard to ramp everything back up then, and when the supply isn't there and the demand is there, the prices will go up.
By the middle of February, grocery store owners were already feeling the squeeze, slashing profit margins and passing the buck onto consumers.
We have seen a bit of a pushback, especially from the old pensioners who have limited income.
Then a major global conflict.
Russia struck at the heart of Ukraine's second largest city, laying waste to Russia's claim it's only targeting military sites.
Russia's invasion of Ukraine in February, the beginning of a major humanitarian crisis that would ripple through the global economy.
That created challenges in the food system because Ukraine is exporting so much wheat. And then on top of that, there was an oil price hike, and it just all came together at one point at a time when supply was particularly constrained.
World sanctions on Russian oil led to fuel companies charging more and more at the pump. By March in Metro Vancouver, gas prices broke through the dreaded $2 per liter barrier.
Gas price is really too high. Can't even afford to, drive it.
I don't remember the last time I filled my whole tank up.
A surge in fuel costs that continued to drive up the price of just about everything else.
Well, if you've noticed the cost of everyday items going up in BC, you're not alone.
By March, inflation rates rose to 6.7%, a number not seen in 31 years. After repeat calls by many on the province to do something, BC's premier offered a little relief.
We're giving money back to the policyholders, the people who finance ICBC.
$110 checks for insurance holders that were criticized as doing little to solve a mounting affordability crisis.
What they're not doing is investing that money into longer-term solutions that actually do solve affordability crises.
2020, this pack of hickory smoked turkey went for $5.67, and now it's $6.49.
Through the spring, inflation kept rising before it peaked at 8.1% in June, forcing the Bank of Canada to try to rein it in.
Inflation is too high, and more people are getting more worried that high inflation is here to stay. We cannot let that happen.
The benchmark interest rate was raised by a full percentage point in June.
The thing is that what that does is it hurts the economy. It hurts purchasing power. It hurts people who are trying to get into the housing market. It hurts business trying to invest. But that's sort of the point.
Steady rate increases in the months that followed slowed BC's real estate market, while many debt holders and recent home buyers faced repeated spikes in monthly payments.
We're just tightening the belt. We stopped dining out, started sale shopping, coupon clipping, like we had to do in the old times. We stopped investing in our kids' RESPs.
Rates that also put upward pressure on already sky-high rents by both forcing landlords to charge more and increasing competition.
That we've seen rents skyrocket, and I think that rents in particular parts of the city have seen 5, 10, 15% increases, I think, through which has also, again, added pressure to households in metropolitan Vancouver.
As many residents and businesses limp to the end of the year, some encouraging signs. Inflation has dropped to about 7%. Fuel prices are also down. But experts say it's tough to predict what 2023 will hold.
It's a time of precarity, perhaps, that it is one that is murky, that it isn't necessarily, I think, one of sunshine along the path.
Still, the Bank of Canada warns there could be more interest rate hikes in the new year as the country inches closer to a recession.
This is going to be, I think, something to watch in terms of how businesses adapt, how home builders adapt, and just how the general public adapts towards an era when credit is not as available, but yet also more expensive.
Necessary pains, experts say, will eventually bring inflation back down to normal levels.
The question isn't will it come down, the question is how much pain will it take along the way. And we're all hoping for less, but eventually the inflation will back down.
When that might be is up for debate, so why not be optimistic heading into the new year?
I'm optimistic towards 2023 because we have a few other choices that I think that part of it is really how the rest of the world looks, and yet at the same time I think recognizing the graces and really the blessings we do have living in metropolitan Vancouver and in British Columbia.
Staying hopeful for cheaper days ahead might not be easy, but at least it's free. John Hernandez, CBC News, Vancouver.
And there was no shortage of climate-related events in 2022, one being the long summer we had that, of course, extended into October and led to droughts. Ali Patarge and Maggie McPherson trekked out to the last glacier in Metro Vancouver to find out how higher temperatures have affected the glacial melt. And it's sending us warning signs about water conservation.
I know when I first came here in 2006, where I'm standing, this was covered in ice here, or a 1 or 2 meter thick of ice.
The Coquitlam Glacier is nestled on its deathbed. It's more than 1,400 meters high in elevation, far above the Coquitlam watershed. This glacier is the last one standing among a number that formed centuries ago in Metro Vancouver. Today, during the warmer seasons, the runoff provides about 2% of the water in the Coquitlam Reservoir. But that won't be the case for much longer.
This ice is thinning and it's going to decay fairly rapidly. It's one of our best climate indicators of change. And I don't expect this glacier to last past 2050, really.
We found the glacier glistening under 20-degree heat because of unusual summer-like conditions into October. From above, the warning signs are everywhere. The water levels visibly low, the cedars reddening, and a stripe of gray smoke stretching across the sky from the wildfire burning at Manning Park. Scientists are here to measure how fast the glacier is melting using LiDAR technology.
Those markers were the edge of the snow.
Okay, and that's how
So
much
in
it's
2
dropped,
weeks it's dropped and
Yeah.
receded that much.
Wow.
The ice has actually dropped 2 to even 5 meters in just 2 weeks. A lot of that is seasonal snow melt at the top of the glacier, but it's certainly struggling in these warm and dry conditions.
Roughly 200 years ago, during the Little Ice Age, the glacier used to spread past where the point I'm standing to near the edge of that valley. And it used to be way higher, but now it's been reduced to running water during this time of year when it's not snowing.
This is a heavier downstream flow than usual at this time of year, courtesy of the warmer weather. But much of this water will soak into the ground before making it to the rivers. And the water that does make it to the reservoir is not enough to replenish it.
But it's something, and with these glaciers disappearing, that source of water is then gone.
Once the glacier is gone, Marshall says the Coquitlam Reservoir will rely primarily on rainfall.
And we know our precipitation patterns are changing with climate change.
All factors going into long-term water planning.
So I think it's important to look at this, realize how quickly these resources are disappearing. And this is, a sign of what's happening elsewhere in North America for sure, but around the world. And think about how we can conserve our water, our drinking water, as we move into the future.
It's an endangered species, right? And it's an iconic image of what's happening in the region.
At this point, there's no stopping the Coquitlam Glacier's death spiral. What's left of it serves as a stark reminder of challenging times ahead, pushing humanity into uncharted waters. Ali Patarga, CBC News, Vancouver.
New COVID testing requirements for Chinese travelers from countries around the world, where Canada stands after the break.
Right now, BC Transit employs special constables to provide security on their buses, boats, and SkyTrain. But soon they'll have new powers and a new look.
Pants are going to go with the red stripe, and we're going to have the same kind of Eisenhower jacket, but we're going to have brass buttons, and we'll have the shoulder flashes here, plus a collar dogs, and on the epaulets it'll have BC Transit Police.
Ron Foyle, a former inspector with the Vancouver Police Department, will be in charge of the new force.
The bus system, and in particular the SkyTrain system, is just an extension of the street, so what's on the street ends up on the system. And because of that, we have an obligation to our ridership and to our employees to afford them a certain amount of protection.
Foyle says the transit system is safe, but there has been an increase of crime surrounding the SkyTrain line.
We just charged a group of people in the Burnaby area with 47 counts of robbery. We have at 8th Street, and we understand there's a bit of drug dealing going on and that kind of thing. And people don't want to walk through that group of people, so we have to do something to try to at least protect our ridership.
Foyle has so far hired 28 constables, all of them from other police forces. With the BC Transit Force's new legal status, his officers will be able to carry firearms, something they don't do now.
They're going to look like authority figures, they will be authority figures, and they will be enforcing the law, as it were, and the BC Transit Act. And as far as the armed situation goes, I say I'm not prepared to deal with that issue right now.
But does BC Transit really need its own fully equipped police force? Foyle thinks so.
If the public and the person wearing the uniform perceives themselves to be a security guard, that's what they are. If in fact they're policemen and they look like policemen, they dress like policemen, are recognized as policemen by the public, they're able to do a better job.
Paul Heaney, CBC News, Vancouver.
Some countries around the world are bringing in new COVID testing requirements today for travelers coming in from China. They are getting ready for an influx as China has now loosened its own COVID rules. Julia Wong shows us why the concern is so great and how Canada is reacting.
COVID is running rampant in China and hospitals are filling up. Patients wait outside to get into emergency rooms, only to then crowd hallways inside. Countries adjusting the COVID policy would invariably go through a period of adaptation, says a spokesperson for the Foreign Affairs Ministry. China is no exception as we shift gear in our COVID policy. Just days from now, it'll be easier for people to travel outside China. I was quite excited when I heard the news, Kyle Wu says. It's been 3 years since he last traveled. But there's concern over what China's COVID situation means globally. The United States, Italy, and Japan will now require a COVID test from visitors from mainland China. One infectious disease specialist says Canada should consider doing the same.
If there's a lot of people with COVID coming in, possibly different strains, and the world might see an increased number of COVID. But the impact is not going to be as it was before. The majority of Canadians have been exposed to COVID.
Transport Canada tells CBC News it's monitoring the situation. And Canada's public health agency says a variant driving cases in China has been detected for a number of months. Until weeks ago, the Chinese government worked aggressively to stamp out COVID, but eased rules after mounting public pressure. 90% of people in China have had 2 vaccine doses, but for those over 80, it's only 2/3. And Chinese-made vaccines are widely seen as less effective than mRNA vaccines used elsewhere. Most patients are elderly with severe symptoms, says this Beijing doctor. The situation so dire, funeral processions have been constant.
A lot of these deaths are because people can't access health care because the hospitals are overwhelmed.
As the virus surges in China, other countries may be forced to consider if they need to be more cautious with visitors arriving from this hotspot. Julia Wong, CBC News, Edmonton.
2 suspects are now charged with first-degree murder in the fatal shooting of an Ontario provincial police officer. As Deanna Sumanak-Johnson reports, we're learning more about the victim from those grieving his loss.
At the police detachment where Constable Greg Piuschala briefly got to live out his dream as a police officer, a memorial is growing.
I just felt so bad for all the police officers, and our community is so safe. I just wanted to do something to see if I could cheer them up.
I too had lost a brother in the line of duty in 2012, so I understand to a degree what the family is going through and how it affects all the officers as well.
The 28-year-old Ontario provincial police officer had just passed his 10-month probation period when he was shot and killed Tuesday afternoon. He was responding to a call about a vehicle in a ditch about 40 kilometers away from Hamilton, Ontario. After a brief court appearance, the 2 suspects were charged with first-degree murder, 25-year-old Randall McKenzie and 30-year-old Brandy Stewart Sperry. Their next court date is January 17th. 200 kilometers away, another community is also grieving.
It takes the wind out of you, where you sit and you can't believe it's real.
At the high school Piuschala attended in Barrie, Ontario, he is remembered as an optimistic young man and a stellar athlete. Piuschala excelled at soccer and track and field, but wrestling was a particular passion. He continued with the sport at York University.
Anyone that had an involvement with him will tell you the exact same story. The hug, the smile, the joy, the faith that radiate out of him was ever present, always there, and he is exactly what you are going to hear about. He was every bit what you hear about and more.
Deanna Sumanak-Johnson, CBC News, Cayuga, Ontario.
Well, Pope Francis is calling for prayers for his 95-year-old predecessor. The pontiff says Pope Benedict is very ill. Benedict stepped down as leader of the Roman Catholic Church nearly a decade ago, citing his advanced age as a major factor. Megan Williams is in Rome.
The most recent photographs of Emeritus Pope Benedict show a very fragile 95-year-old. So today's announcement by Pope Francis that the former Pope Benedict is very sick has not come as a huge surprise here at the Vatican. Pope Francis urged Catholics to pray for him, and there's a sense here that he could live for a few more days, perhaps. The Vatican is not releasing any details. It says he's being carefully looked after by his doctors, of course. Italian media are reporting that it's likely a heart problem. But again, this is a pope who is very old. He's 95 years old. He retired almost 10 years ago when he was 85. And at that point, he said he just didn't have the physical and mental energy to carry on. In terms of what comes next, it's not clear. It's an anomalous situation to have two popes who are alive, one former pope, one present pope. Pope Benedict was the first pope in 600 years to retire. So it's not clear in this situation what the funeral arrangements might be, but we'll be standing by and watching and waiting. Megan Williams, CBC News, the Vatican.
Bad weather is being blamed for a fiery multi-vehicle pileup that killed one person north of Calgary late last night. More than a dozen vehicles were involved in the crash along Highway 2. One of them, a large truck that burst into flames. 9 people were injured. A passing driver who took this video told CBC News he missed the accident by mere moments. Well, Canada and 3 other countries are taking action to hold Iran legally accountable for the downing of Ukrainian Flight 752. The commercial plane was shot down by Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard on January 8, 2020, shortly after takeoff from Tehran. All 176 people on board were killed, including many with ties to Canada. An Ontario man who lost his wife and daughter on that flight says this move offers some hope.
This is a very important step forward to make Islamic Republic of Iran accountable. The important thing is that we don't think that Iran is going to cooperate with these 4 affected countries, and we expect this case to go to The Hague on 28th of May next year.
Joining Canada are Sweden, Ukraine, and the United Kingdom. The 4 countries are demanding Iran submit to binding arbitration of the dispute related to the downing of the plane. If there's no agreement in 6 months, the 4 countries can take the case to the International Court of Justice. 55 Canadian citizens, 30 permanent residents, and 53 others traveling to Canada were among those killed in the tragedy. Well, it's been 6 months since the start of an investigation into an alleged group sexual assault after the 2003 World Juniors hockey tournament in Halifax. The World Juniors are now back in Halifax, and there are concerns that police and Hockey Canada aren't doing enough to get to the bottom of the allegations. Karen Pauls has the story and a warning. This story contains subject matter and language that may be upsetting to some viewers.
This victims' rights activist believes well-paid current and retired NHL players are being protected by a culture that puts them on a pedestal.
Those young men who were in the 2003 juniors, most of them, probably all but one that I know of, went on to play in the NHL.
The 2003 allegations made earlier this year by a man who says he saw a video in Halifax nearly 20 years ago.
I recognized 2 of the players, and both of them went on to have NHL careers.
We're not identifying him because he fears repercussions.
I seen a hockey player of the 2003 World Junior team take a video camera and turn it towards himself and say, "This is going to be a f***ing lamb roast." There was 5 or 6 naked players all masturbating, with one person having sex with a girl on a bed who seemed extremely intoxicated.
Halifax police won't say who they've interviewed. At least 3 players we've heard from say they haven't been contacted.
They're speaking with everyone that they need to in relation to...
He won't say if they've heard from an alleged victim, but adds there's no statute of limitations.
Whether it comes from memory, whether that's evidence.
Hockey Canada's independent third party has hired an investigator to look into the allegations. She hopes this World Juniors tournament will spark memories and that people will come forward.
Those 19-year-old junior hockey players are now in their late 30s
which of course brings a different perspective to things.
Catherine LaRoche says she understands why victims may not want to come forward. She knows exactly what it's like to report allegations of sexual assault involving a major junior hockey player who became an NHL star.
And I had an anxiety attack, and it was like 5 years later, 6 years later.
LaRoche later dropped her allegations, deciding it wasn't part of her healing journey. Her advice to other women?
It must be a lot of pressure, but she shouldn't be driven by that pressure. She should be driven by what speaks to her inside.
Judy Haven hopes the alleged 2003 victim isn't triggered by the coverage of this tournament. Her group has an online petition demanding that some of the profits go towards supporting survivors of sexual assault. Karen Pauls, CBC News, Halifax.
After the break, winter chaos has walloped air travel across the continent. But for one U.S. airline, it looks like weather may not be the only problem.
My name is Johanna Wagstaff. I'm a meteorologist and an earth scientist. Every day, I see the effects of climate change through my work. A relentless cycle of extreme weather, terrifying storms, deadly heat domes, wildfires, droughts. But I remain in awe of the natural world and how it finds ways to adapt. And that's what we explore on Planet Wonder. Okay, did you remember your passport? Did you turn off all the lights? Do you have your book? Is your phone charged? Turns out, it takes a single drop of water about 1,000 years to travel around the world. We also know global warming is changing everything. So that got me wondering, how is climate change messing with the motion of the ocean? Oceans are all about movement, and it starts with sucking in CO2. And there is a lot of extra CO2 in our atmosphere right now, higher levels than at any time in the past 400,000 years because of burning fossil fuels. Now, a bunch of it, as we know, just hangs out in our atmosphere for a long, long time, heating our planet up by creating a giant greenhouse. Some of it is taken up by plants through photosynthesis. Thank you, trees. But a huge amount ends up in our oceans. Oceans absorb 30 to 50% of the CO2 produced by burning fossil fuels. Without our oceans, global warming would have already made the planet a lot warmer. How exactly does the ocean consume carbon? First, through basic chemistry. It's just carbon dioxide dissolves in water. H2O plus CO2 equals H2CO3. This is carbonic acid, which literally just breaks apart and reforms as bicarbonate, which is stored in shells and bones of marine organisms. The other way the ocean eats CO2 is through photosynthesis by phytoplankton, which are microscopic plant-like organisms. They generate about half the oxygen in the atmosphere, as much per year as all plants on land. But of course, there is a limit to how much CO2 the ocean can take in. To understand how the ocean is already changing, I connected with Simon Donner, an ocean scientist and climate change communicator who often commutes to work in his kayak. First, he's going to explain the three main ways water moves in our oceans: surface currents, vertical mixing, and the global conveyor belt.
Travel woes are snowballing for people who have booked flights with Southwest Airlines. The company has canceled thousands of trips to and from the United States in the wake of winter storms across many parts of the country. It's not the only reason, though, that the airline is struggling right now. Travis Dunraj has more from Washington.
It's the airline so many travelers are angry with right now. Packed airports, missed flights, frayed nerves, all due to Southwest.
Every time the text bings, I'm like, another delay, another cancel, don't cancel.
Right now, we just want to get on a plane.
Southwest has canceled more than 2,600 flights today, approximately 16,000 since that winter storm hit last week. But the weather isn't the only culprit. An old scheduling system and poor logistics infrastructure are also to blame. As for baggage and passengers who checked their luggage and are now trying to find it, an absolute mess.
I'm here right now to get my luggage back that supposedly already flew in to Oregon.
We spent 3 hours here yesterday and finally just gave up, and now we're here today and the line's much shorter, which is good, but still, it's been an awful experience.
The company's CEO putting out a mea culpa video for all of it.
Clearly, we need to double down on our already existing plans to upgrade systems for these extreme circumstances.
The U.S. Transportation Secretary called it unacceptable. Pete Buttigieg saying his department may issue fines if it's found the company did not meet its legal obligation to passengers.
From what I can tell, Southwest is unable to locate even where their own crews are, let alone their own passengers, let alone baggage.
This is the scene at Reagan International Airport. More bags. On its website, Southwest says its vision is to be the most efficient and loved airline in the world. Across the United States tonight, you'd be hard-pressed to find many travelers that agree with that statement. Travis Dunraj, CBC News, Washington.
Kuljeet Kaila is here once again for a check of the weather. And of course, yeah, like the storm across the continent caused a lot of problems for everybody last week trying to travel. But that here has really shifted, hasn't it?
It has shifted a little bit. We still had some concerns of flooding in parts of Vancouver Island. Those alerts got lifted, thankfully. We do have an avalanche warning, which we spoke about earlier this hour, stretching from just north of Mackenzie almost all the way down to Revelstoke. The other warning is a wind warning in effect for part of the coast around Port Hardy. Winds are going to be around 60 kilometers an hour, going up to 80 and up to 100 kilometers an hour overnight tonight. So gusty winds through there for tonight into tomorrow morning. Our current temperatures outside -3 in Prince George, -19 in Fort Nelson, and Vancouver sitting at 4 and over in Alberta, -4 in Calgary, and a -12 for Edmonton. So a chilly one there. Here's what's happening locally in the next few days coming up. Today's high sat at 8 degrees above average. Records 11.6 back in 2011. We're really not that far off, it feels like. The rain that's going to start, the next wave of rain that's going to start is about 6 a.m. Thursday morning. It's going to last until about late Saturday morning before it dissipates, up to 55 millimeters of rain. Everyone keeps asking, is it going to be a dry weekend for New Year's Eve? Right now, a 40% risk of rain for this weekend. Hopefully that dies down a little bit and we can have a dry celebration into the new year. Lots of rain coming for the next couple of days, ending for the weekend. Some sun even peaking on Sunday. A little bit more rain for Monday and Tuesday, and heading into mid next week, about 15 millimeters of rain. So lots of wet conditions still on the way for us here in Vancouver. Anita?
Seems pretty normal for Vancouver.
Yeah.
Thanks, Kuljeet.
You're welcome.
Coming up, a furry visitor on the prowl in Vancouver Island. The hair-raising concerns from area residents is next.
It's still in construction, but we are building a greenhouse that is very tall, so I can grow my fruit trees in there.
Can you show me inside? Let's take a look.
Well, as I said, it's still in construction, so when we moved over here, we just put all the plants in pots for now, just so that they survive. And what I'm going to do in here is we're planting samples of all the different fruit, because it's mostly fruit and plants that people probably haven't seen before, or at least never tasted the fruit of. We have over 65 to 70 different types, and we're adding more all the time. But we have things like persimmons, we have lots of figs, we have 5 flavor fruits, we have something unusual, a blue sausage tree. I love that one. It comes from the border of China, Tibet there, and it has a metallic blue sausage-like fruit. And it tastes like jello inside and tastes like watermelon with some lemon. This is called a flying dragon. It comes from Japan originally. It's a contorted lemon, and you just have to be really careful. It has those spikes, those hooked spikes, and you can make an impenetrable hedge out of it when you plant those as a hedge. I'm actually specializing on hardy ones because I don't want to sell things that are a lot of work. I want to cut down on, for example, the carbon footprint by growing easy exotics or unusual plants here, so it doesn't have to be transported from far away. I grow from seed, I grow from cuttings, and some I have to bring in. I just love reading and doing research. These are all persimmons, and I just can't believe how much those little sticks already produce here. This is called Nikita's gift. They have to get really, really soft. They're more like a little juice bag, and it's incredibly sweet. When I have a seed, I cannot throw it out. I could never throw it. It hurts inside, kind of, because I know this little seed has all the life in it, right? And I just love my plants, same as I would my children, my pets, or whatever, right? I just have the responsibility. When I have them, they're dependent on me, and I have to take care of them. We will do workshops here. We will do all those other events where people can come and just enjoy, like tasting events, but I also want to offer, for example, how to build this, how to grow those fruit, what they need, how to collect your rainwater, how to have a self-sufficient system. It's just so nice to share that excitement about it and share the fruit and provide nutrition at the same time.
We're sharing really important information with the public, and I feel like this is exactly what our job is, especially as the public broadcaster, especially in morning radio. That's incredibly important.
Land Back is a CBC original podcast where we uncover land theft in Canada and look at how Indigenous people are taking it all back. Land Back is out now on CBC Listen or wherever you get your podcasts.
To Nanaimo now, where some people living on an island in the harbor of the city are feeling uneasy after a new resident moved into the community. A cougar was spotted on Friday, and it appears to have no plans on leaving Protection Island.
They would love for it to be relocated. I feel like they're not leaving their homes. I've talked to many people who are frightened and haven't left their home in 5 days. And there's other people who are enjoying this new person, new animal.
The Conservation Officer Service says cougars are common on Vancouver Island and are known to swim to smaller islands from time to time. It says officers have received multiple calls about the cougar on Protection Island, and the situation is being monitored closely. Yeah, scary one for sure. Okay, South Surrey resident Trevor Brucky is trying to do some good this holiday season. He was walking with his family on Boxing Day when he found an old photo on the ground. Brucky decided to pick up the photo in case it rained, and now he wants to find who it belongs to.
I don't even remember which one of us looked down and we're like, oh, there's a photograph. And I look at it and I'm like, well, actually, that's a really old photograph. That would be unfortunate to lose that. It could be something that's special to somebody. So I just picked it up and I put it in my pocket, and I thought, well, I'll come back later with tape and stick it up on the light post, and maybe somebody's going to be looking for it. but then it started to rain. So I thought, well, that might not be a good idea. And I just kind of thought, how am I going to get the word out to hopefully find somebody, the owner of it? And, well, social media seems to be a pretty good way these days.
Brecky says the photo looks like it was taken in the 1930s. He hopes if anybody recognizes it, they'll contact him, and he welcomes people to reach out to him on Facebook. Yeah, a very nice photo, hopefully reunited with its owner. Thanks for watching CBC Vancouver News tonight. We leave you with a live shot of the Whistler Olympic Plaza covered in a blanket of snow as people skate around. Just beautiful. We'll see you tomorrow.